Welcome back. Let's talk some finance. The rand has been struggling to recover after South Africa was greylisted last week. Now, this week, financial and social watchers in this country will be looking out for the jobs data that's coming out tomorrow. To discuss, we're joined by SABC News Economics Editor Tshepo Mongoai. Great to have you with us in studio, as we always do, as long as you're available on a Monday. So, in terms of unemployment, that's what we're going to look at. We know it's dire in South Africa. Just remind us where we are based on the trends and the last figures.
Well, unemployment, if you look at the trend, has slowed slightly. Third quarter, we've seen it at 32.9%, and that, I remember earlier it was at around 35%. So we have been gradually recovering some of the lost ground in terms of jobs that were shared mainly because of COVID. But the question is, will this be sustainable? But we also know that the overall picture in terms of unemployment remains dire. There might be some green shoots, very small here and there in terms of jobs that we've recovered. We know that during the third quarter, about 204,000 jobs were created, but we also lost 269,000 jobs, and you see that the levels of job that we are losing, it remains a concern. So we have around many people who are still very much unemployed in the country. Formal sector jobs at around 10 million, and then 7.7 unemployed people in the country. That picture doesn't change much. We may see that here and there, maybe at around 30% unemployment, 32, maybe 32.6% unemployment, but it's quite marginal to change the overall picture. But we do talk about it, that we are making some improvement.
But you're right. I mean, even a percentage change here and there, when you're above 30%, and it's much higher if you consider the people who've simply given up looking for work, it's extreme. Even if we were above 25, above 20, I mean, we are among the worst, even on the African continent.
Yeah, they discouraged job seekers. Currently, the last data puts it at 3.5 million people who've given up hopes of finding a job. That's out of about 15 million not economically active people. So you could tell that that has been a concern. Of course, during the third quarter, we've seen that a number of discouraged job seekers are dropping marginally, I think by around 54,000 numbers. But it's also seasonal, remember. People, when it's beginning of the year, they get excited, they've got new resolutions, so they look forward with new hopes for the new year. So they go out there and try to find jobs. And that you may see perhaps unemployment starting to decline a little bit, because they are not regarded as people who are unemployed because they're actively looking for work. But in actual sense, we're still sitting with a broad definition over 40%. And of course, youth being the hardest hit by unemployment with over 50%. Obviously, for obvious reasons, because majority of the population, it's young people.
And of course, it was Christmas, so we're looking at the last 3 months of last year. Will this be a gauge of how devastating the rolling blackouts are?
Yes.
To what extent companies are firing people or retrenching just because they cannot afford to pay those salaries?
Absolutely. If you look at the third quarter number, you look at manufacturing and trade, they've created more jobs than any other sector. And if you look at that, they rely a lot on electricity, particularly manufacturing. Obviously, if they are able to operate, they will have to find alternative source of energy, and obviously that takes a lot of resources away from where they need to invest in terms of growth and other areas. So if the trend in terms of sectors that have contributed, we still see manufacturing, of course you are likely to see that such sectors will choose not to commit in terms of job creation because of uncertainty. But we know that generally when there is no positive sentiment in terms of the future outlook, companies are very much reluctant to employ. Again, going back to the third quarter, type of jobs that were created were managers, majority. It was not at the lower end of jobs. So you're likely to see, that being permanent jobs, in contrast to a trend that we've seen in the past, where most of the jobs that were created were temporary, because the higher you go, the jobs are permanent. So your private household, they've been losing jobs simply because people cannot afford to keep those who are helping them in their homes. They are finding other ways of getting some assistance, either once or temporary, or they choose not to have somebody. And with the minimum wage that was passed, that actually compel households to increase the rates that they pay domestic workers, we may see that part of job creation suffering even further because people are under pressure.
And that's, we're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of domestic workers potentially vulnerable. Thank you for teasing out those trends, and we will watch those numbers very closely when they come out tomorrow. That was SABC News Economics Editor Tshepo Mongoai.